Dear students, welcome to Darasa Online. We are keeping on reminding you on doing different revisions, especially those subtopics which they are difficult and sometimes they are making trouble in solving some problems. Now, we are going on with divisions in economics, and today we are going to discuss on the theory of international trade. So here our subject, it is economics. Our topic, it is international trade. International trade, that is our topic. In the last discussion in this topic, we tried to discuss on the theories of international trade. We tried to check how the theory of absolute advantage is operating. We also checked on how the theory of comparative advantage it is applied in international trade. So our today's discussion is going to deal in one of the subtopic, which is the exchange rate. So here our subtopic, it is going to exchange rate. So probably you have covered this one in the class. You know what is exchange rate perhaps, but we are going to have further discussion on how these exchange rates they operate, the importance of these exchange rates, and probably we'll go to solve some questions later. So let's start from a definition. When we speak of exchange rate, what do we mean? Now recall back to what we did in the class. When we say exchange rate, remember before we define exchange rate, remember different countries, they have different currencies. That means we have in Tanzania, we have Tanzanian shillings. We have maybe in Kenya, they have maybe Kenyan shillings. You go in United States, they have United States dollars. We have pound, euro, maybe Japanese yen, and the other currencies which they are found in different parts of the world. Now, in modern economics or in modern economies, we find that this money or these currencies, they are traded in the market like other commodities. It means you can buy and sell these currencies, or you can buy and sell different forms of money in the so-called capital market or money market. Now, it means in those markets, we need to determine the price at which one currency must be exchanged with another currency. For example, maybe how much Tanzanian shillings is needed to exchange with one United States dollars. For that case, when we determine that rate or that price, then we say that is the exchange rate. Because I said in the modern economy, these foreign currencies or domestic currencies, they exchanged or they are bought and sold like other commodities. Now, in exchanging these currencies, we need to have the so-called the exchange rate. Now, an exchange rate, we say is the rate at which a domestic currency is exchanged against other currencies. That is exchange rate. So when we say exchange rate, we are speaking the rate at which domestic currency of any country, it should be exchanged with other currencies. When we say other currencies, means foreign currency. For example, I said in Tanzania, we have Tanzanian shillings. How can we exchange Tanzanian shillings with the other currencies? Maybe I said, for example, maybe Japanese yen, maybe those pound, euro, United States dollars. How do we exchange them? So it means the rate at which our domestic currency is exchanged with these foreign currencies, we say this is exchange rate. Or in other language, you can say exchange rate is the price of one currency against the other currency. So this is also another definition, because you said we are buying and selling these currencies in the market. So it means you can say exchange rate, it is the price of one currency against other currencies. For example, when we say for example, one United States dollars maybe is equal to 2,400 T shillings. This is the exchange rate. It means to get one $1 in terms of $1, you use 2,400 T shillings. So this is the price at which United States dollar is exchanged against Tanzanian shilling. So we say this is exchange rate. Or when we say maybe another example, maybe 1K shillings, that is Kenyan shillings, maybe is equal to 20 T shillings. Now this is an exchange rate. It means this is an exchange rate between Kenyan shillings versus Tanzanian shilling. That means to get 1 Kenyan shilling, you use 20 units of Tanzanian shillings. So this is an example of exchange rate. That's why I said it is a price of which domestic currency or one currency is exchanged against other currencies. And this is when we speak of exchange rate. Now in exchange rate, or in this market where these currencies are bought and sold, we have two forms of currency that they can be exchanged. For example, we can have the so-called hard currency, and in other words, we can have the so-called soft currency. We want to see the difference of these two items. I said in exchange rates, or in exchanging money from one money form to another, or buying one money and another one, we have two forms of currency which can be considered. We have the so-called hard currency, and we have the so-called soft currency. Now, when we say hard currency, what does it mean? It means hard currency are those currencies which are easily converted into other currencies. That is these hard currencies. It means hard currencies are those forms of money or forms of currencies which they are easily converted, or they can be easily converted from one form to another form. It means these currencies, you can find them everywhere because they are easily converted, so you can find them everywhere. For example, you can find those currencies in any country because they can be easily converted from one currency to another currency. For example, when we speak currencies like e.g. we have USD. This is a hard currency because it is very common to find USD everywhere. You can find in Tanzania, you go in Kenya, you'll find USD, United States dollars, you go maybe in Uganda, in all countries, because this form of money or this form of currency can be changed, converted easily into other currencies. Then we say this is a hard currency. We have the other currencies, for example, like maybe the euro, we have the pound, etc. Such currencies, you can find them everywhere. For example, maybe in developing countries or even developed countries, it is very easy to find these form of currencies circulating in the economy. Though we have our domestic currencies, but you can find these, they are mostly preferred in exchange of goods and services, just because this form of money, they can easily be converted or exchanged from one currency to another currency. Then we say these are called the hard currencies. Now, these hard currencies, as I said, they are very common, and they are mostly used in international trade in exchanging goods and services. So in international trade, it is very easy to find hard currencies because those countries during international trade, they find the most easiest way to exchange their currency. So they use this form of money because they are easily convertible from one form to another form. But what makes these currencies to be hard and to be easy, we have some reasons. For example, one of the reasons, these currencies, they are stable in value. It means all hard currencies, they are stable in value. That means their value cannot fluctuate easily. It is not easy for them to depreciate. You can find they can appreciate easily, but not depreciating, these form of currencies. So they are stable in value for a long period of time. For example, you can find, it is not easy to find maybe USD, it has depreciated in form of other currencies. Not easy, because this form of money, it is stable for a long period of time. This is hard currency. But also, this money, they have high purchasing power, but they are influenced by strong policy of their federal bank or in short, we say this is the central bank. Central bank. So it means these currencies, they are also hard and they are mostly also useful because they are produced under a very strong federal policy. That means the central bank of these countries, which they produce these hard currencies, they have very strong policy. And this policy, they maintain the value of their currency for longer time in terms of what other currencies. And this is when we speak of hard currency. In international trade, hard currencies, as we said, they can be converted easily from one form to another form. On the other hand, the vice versa of hard currencies, we get the soft currencies. It means these soft currencies are all currencies which are not easily converted into another form of money. That means not easily converted from one form of currency to another form of currency. It means all currencies which it is very hard, it is very difficult to convert them from one form to another form. Those currencies are called the soft currency. For example, I said to convert USD, it means when you have USDs, you can go with them everywhere in the world and you can exchange them. You can move with them in every country if you have USDs in terms of United States dollars. It means you can move with them to any country and you can exchange them where you are. But we have some currencies which, once you enter in some countries, you cannot exchange them because those currencies, they are not easily converted. And these currencies, in most time, they depreciate very easy. They depreciate easily. These currencies. That's why it is difficult to convert them. They depreciate easily. That means they are not acceptable in some of the countries. That's why for these currencies, you can find mostly they are used domestically by that country, but they cannot be used easily in the international trade, just because they depreciate easily and they are not quite acceptable to different countries. But also, these ones, their federal policy is not strong. That means the monetary authority, through the federal bank or the central bank, their policies of monetary authorities, they are not strong. That they make the currency to depreciate easily. That's why it is not acceptable. Most of the developing countries, they have soft currency, including Tanzania. It means our T-shillings is soft currency because it is depreciating easily, and that is the reality. It is depreciating easily, but also it is not much acceptable in other countries. You cannot find, maybe for example, in those developed countries, domestically they are using T-shillings. Not easy, just because this currency, it is a soft currency, it is easily depreciating, and it is not stable in value. This is when we speak of soft currency and the hard currency. So having seen these two currencies, which they are much used in international trade, especially in exchange rate, let us go to see the part of the forms or types of exchange rate. So we try to check the types or the forms of exchange rates. So our today's discussion will focus on two main types of exchange rates, which includes the following. So we go to the types or forms of exchange rate. Now the first useful form of exchange rate worldwide, it is the so-called flexible, or it is also called the floating exchange rate. Flexible or floating exchange rate. That is one of the common form of exchange rate which is existing, especially in this modern world. Now, what is this? It means this is an exchange rate, is exchange rate which is determined by the market forces of demand and supply. So we see, because we are taking economics, so we can easily understand what we said, market forces of demand and supply. It means in this exchange rate, the government do not influence exchange rate. The exchange rate of a particular country, the exchange rate at which the domestic currency is exchanged against foreign currency is determined free by the forces of demand and supply. It means the demand for a particular currency, the supply of a particular currency is the one which is going to determine the exchange rate of that particular currency. The government do not intervene in this system. It means demand and supply determines the price of a domestic currency against a foreign currency. That is one. So it means in this flexible exchange rate, the force of demand and supply, they are the one which determine the price of that currency. Remember we said the exchange rate can also be defined as the price at which one currency is exchanged against other currencies. So it means the market force of demand and supply, they are the one which they interact to determine the exchange rate of that particular economy. Now, for example, you consider the diagram below, how this exchange rate is determined. You can have a diagram like this. These are quantities of a currency, and this is price of a currency. Now, if we have a demand for a currency like this is demand for a currency, and we have supply of a currency, this is supply of a currency. It means the interaction between demand and supply, they reach equilibrium at this point. It means at this point where the 2 points they intersect, this is they determine the exchange rate of this particular currency, but also this is the equilibrium quantity of that currency supplied in the market. So it means the interaction between demand and supply, they cause or they determine exchange rate. Meaning that in this form of exchange rate, when demand changes, it is going also to cause changes in exchange rate. When supply of a currency changes, it is also going to cause changes in exchange rate. For example, if maybe demand increases, ceteris paribus, if demand increases, you see, demand for that currency has increased. Maybe in international trade, demand has increased. You can see here, the exchange rate is going to move up. So you can find this will be like the new exchange rate, like just because demand has increased. Likewise, when demand falls, maybe it falls to demand 2 here. This is demand 2. You can also see the exchange rate has also determined here. So you can find that when exchange rate can fluctuate or can change depending on the changes in demand or supply. It means likewise when supply changes, either increasing or decreasing, we expect the exchange rate also to shift. So for that case, this form of exchange rate, the exchange rate is not stable. It fluctuates from time to time. You can find in the morning the exchange rate is this one. Maybe after some hours you find it has changed, because the change of the exchange rate will be fluctuating or will be changing depending on demand and supply of that currency. When demand for that currency increases, we expect the exchange rate to change. When demand falls, it will also change. Likewise, when supply changes, either by increasing or decreasing, we expect against the exchange rate to fluctuate or to change. Now, for that case, in this system or in these economies, the exchange rate is not stable. You find it is changing from time to time. That is, it is causing uncertainties in the economy. This is for the case of a flexible exchange rate. Now, we have some few advantages here. Advantages, or you can say merit of this exchange rate. It means despite having no government interference in this market system, having no government interference in termination of exchange rate, still this system may have some advantages. For example, one of the advantages is that it gives greater freedom in foreign exchange market. It means because there is no government interference, there is no government intervention, in the foreign exchange market, there is greater freedom. That means individuals, either importers or exporters, they have greater freedom on their decision because there is no government intervention. So this is one of the advantage. But also, when we use these flexible exchange rates, it determines the strength and the stability of the currency and the economy. Again, this form of exchange rate, if it is used in the economy, one of the advantages is that this exchange rate, it is used to determine, or it is used to show if the economy is stable or is not stable. It can also be used to know whether the currency, that is our currency, is it stable or not stable. It means when we use this form of exchange rate, it is very easy to know whether our economy is stable or not stable. It is used to know the strength of the economy, the strength of the currency when we use this one. But if the government could be intervening from time to time, that means it cannot be easy to know whether the economy is stable or not stable, because there is no such freedom of the demand and the supply. Another advantage, the government can earn revenue. It means from this system of exchange, or from this form of exchange rate, the government can earn revenue from there. How do it earn revenue? Because we said exchange rate, this one, it is facilitated by import and export. It means the demand for currency and supply for currency, they are determined by import and export. When import increases, what will be the demand for the currency? When import increases, what will be the supply of the currency? So it means import and export, they are the one which they determine this exchange rate by determining demand for and supply of that currency. Now, through import and export, the government can earn revenue when it is going to facilitate this form of exchange rate in form of tax or in form of import duties and others. This is again one of the advantage of this form of exchange. Then we have some disadvantages of this form of exchange. Disadvantages. One of the disadvantages of this system is that, number one, it encourages speculations. If you remember from what we did in the class, as economic students, it is not a difficult terminology to you, the word speculation. It is very much useful in demand and supply. It is useful in some other topics, speculation. To speculate means because the demand, because the exchange rate is not determined by the government, by demand and supply. It means individuals can take those currencies, then hide or keep them, waiting for exchange rate to increase for them to sell those currencies. Now, the tendency of those importers or exporters, or those who are dealing with the capital market, to hide or to keep those money or those currencies aside, waiting for exchange rate to go up and sell those money, then we say that is speculation. So these speculations can create shortage in the economy, of which can create more problems. So when we use this system of exchange, it is very easy to find speculators in the system. The second disadvantage, this system, it causes uncertainties. Remember, uncertainties means we are not certain. We don't know what will be happening in future. Maybe in some hours to come, in some days to come, because the demand and supply, they are fluctuating from time to time. They are not stable, so it is very difficult to make predictions of what will be happening maybe in the future. Now, for that case, those are uncertainties, because we are not sure after how many hours the rate is going to change, after how many days it's going to change, by how much or by how far. Then this is causing uncertainties. So this form of exchange rate, it can cause uncertainties in the economy. Another one, it can cause economic instabilities. economic instabilities. Economic instabilities like inflation, maybe inflation, like deflation, etc. So these instabilities, they can also occur due to this flexible exchange rate, because we said due to uncertainties in the production, uncertainties in the export, uncertainties in all activities, because demand and supply, they are the ones which determine exchange rate, then it is very easy to find instabilities, inflation or deflation, which were not expected in the economy. That is one of the disadvantage of this exchange rate. Then we go to the last form of exchange rate, number 2, which is a fixed, or it is called the controlled, or it is called the paged exchange rate. Exchange rate. Fixed, controlled, or paged exchange rate. Now this is one of the common form of exchange rate which is also existing in different parts of the world. Remember, for the case of flexible exchange rate, it is very common in capitalist countries. It means in capitalist countries, because demand and supply, they are free. That means it is easier to find flexible exchange rate. But in the socialist countries, where all decisions are made by the central planning authority or by the government, then it is very easy to find this form of exchange rate. How does it operate? It means in this form of exchange rate, we say is an exchange rate where the price of the domestic currency against foreign currency is determined by the government through the central bank. So that is the controlled or fixed exchange rate. In this system of exchange rate, the price, the exchange rate, is determined by the government through the central bank of that country. It means each country has the central bank, which is the controller, and it has authorities over all monetary issues. So it means in this system, the exchange rate is determined by the government and under the central bank of that given state or given country. For example, in Tanzania, we have the Bank of Tanzania, BOT. It is the central bank. Now, if we want to operate under fixed exchange rate or under controlled exchange rate, it means the BOT, the central bank, will be the one which will be controlling or fixing that exchange rate. And under this system, the exchange rate can remain stable for a long period of time. It can remain stable for a long period of time. Why? Because the government is the one which is fixing or determining that exchange rate. So it is very easy to find that exchange rate remaining stable for a long period of time, because there is no unexpected fluctuations. So it can remain stable for a longer period of time. Remember, under this system, the government can maintain that exchange rate by having large reserve of foreign currency. It means what is needed here is the large reserve of foreign currency. It means to maintain that exchange rate for longer time, the government needs to have a reserve of foreign currency, large one. Why? Because we said sometimes you can find in the economy there are shortage of foreign currencies. So the government can maintain that exchange rate by having large reserve foreign currencies. How and why? Because when maybe in the economy there are shortage of foreign currencies, there are shortage of United States dollars, shortage of pound, shortage of euro, and other foreign currencies. It means the government can remove that shortage by supplying in the economy. And once you supply, it means the exchange rate will be maintained back because that shortage have been cleared. So that is how it can respond. So for this case, you find that that exchange rate can be there or can be stable for a long period of time. Then you say this is fixed exchange rate. And as I said, this one can be useful in those pure socialist countries where the government is the controller and the decision maker in all aspects of production, distribution, and exchange. Then now, what are the advantages of this system? Advantage of this system. One of the advantages of this system, it discourages speculation. It discourages speculations. Now, because we said the exchange rate can be stable for a long period of time, it is not easy to find speculators speculating because you are not sure when the exchange rate is going to change. We said in the flexible exchange rate it is easy because at any time exchange rate can fluctuate. So we're expecting maybe when it increases, that time you can speculate. Now for that case, because the government is determining exchange rate and can remain fixed for a long period of time, so it is not easy for speculators to speculate when the system of exchange it is under a fixed exchange rate. Now the second advantage of this system, it is easy to know the inflow and the outflow of foreign currencies. It means with the fixed exchange rate system, it is very easy for the government to understand, to know or to identify the inflow of foreign currencies and the outflow of foreign currency because it is controlling everything in the exchange rate system. So it knows the inflow and the outflow of foreign currency. It means inflow, the movement of foreign currency into the economy, and outflow, the movement of foreign currency out of the economy. So the government can easily know the rate at which foreign currency they are moving in and moving out of the economy. Another one, it can be used as economic instrument in policy formulation and planning. It means this exchange rate, it is very easy to be used as a policy instrument because we said in flexible exchange rate there are uncertainties. It is not easy to plan, not easy to be used as instrument of planning. But in this fixed, because the government is the one which is fixing exchange rate, then you can use it for planning. For example, if you want to make devaluation, if the government wishes maybe to increase export or whatever instrument of planning or policy making, it is very easy to formulate those policies with this system of exchange rate. Then let's complete with the disadvantages of this exchange rate. Disadvantages of fixed exchange rate. Disadvantages. Number one, it is difficult to determine the exchange rate of all other foreign currencies, because the government is the one who is fixing that exchange rate. Now try to imagine, we said it is fixing through the central bank, the government through the central bank. Now try to think maybe the BOT, the Bank of Tanzania, is now using this fixed exchange rate system. Now it has to determine the exchange rate of all other currencies in the world which they are used maybe in Tanzania. It means just to fix exchange rate of Tanzanians versus USDs, to fix Tanzanian versus pound versus maybe euro versus kwacha versus K shillings. So all currency in the world, it is not easy for that central authority to determine all the exchange rate of all countries. It will be difficult. Then number two, it encourage black market. In economics, we know black market. Now, because those speculators and other people dealing with the money market, once they find there is no room for them to make trade or to exchange, because the government is not determining everything, it is very easy to develop black market in the economy, where you can find exchange rate maybe in illegal exchange rate around the economy or in the street, where you can find people they're exchanging money against other currencies in illegal prices. That is black market. So it is one of the disadvantages of this system. Now, this is the end of this part of explanations. We get a minor or a short break. Then after that break, we are going to solve some questions which will be seen there. Thank you. Welcome back after the short break. Now we are going to solve some problems or some questions here. You can see from the screen, we have 3 questions, question 1, question 2, and question 3. We will solve question 1 and 2. Then question 3 will be taken as your homework. Now, let us move together. Now, question number 1, it is asking, why do you think most of the countries have liberalized their exchange system? Why do you think most of the countries have liberalized their exchange system? So, question number 1, this is about exchange rates. Now, the question is asking, why most of the countries in the world, they have liberalized their exchange system. It means here we have to know why they have liberalized the exchange system. It means the word to be liberalized, it is coming from the word which we say liberalization. That is, the word liberalization means a system where there is greater freedom. That means a system where there is no government intervention, there is no government interference. It means individuals, enterprises, they have a maximum freedom in their decision. Now, when we say, we have to ask why most of the countries, they have liberalized the exchange rate system. It means what has caused these countries to make their exchange system most free. That means when we say most free, that means the exchange system, it has gone back to we say the flexible, if you remember, flexible, or we say the floating. So this question, it means it can also ask why most of the countries in the world, they are using flexible or floating exchange system. Because when you use a flexible or floating exchange system, it means the exchange system is now liberalized. That means there is greater freedom of demand and supply, which they are the ones which are determining exchange rate. That means no government interference. So for the case of question number 1, it means here, when we say, why do we think, that means you give reasons as to why these countries, they have liberalized the exchange rate system. It means now the question here demands you to show the reasons which now will use the advantages of a flexible exchange system, most of them, but probably why now they have made the exchange rate system to be free, to be completely free. So as I said, we use most of the advantages of the flexible exchange rate system, which we discussed some minutes ago. We discussed the flexible exchange rate system, then we discussed the advantage of this system. So you have to use those advantages to show that those are the reasons as to why most of the countries in the world, they are using this system of exchange rate, liberalize the system or liberalize the exchange rate system. We said one of the advantages of this system, it is that this system, it gives greater freedom in exchange in foreign exchange market. So that's an advantage. So it means most of the countries have liberalized the exchange system because one of the reasons in this system there is greater freedom in the foreign exchange market where there is no government interference. The government don't intervene in activity. So for that case, most of these countries they use this one. We said also under this system there is the government can earn revenue. That if you remember, again, one of the advantage or one of the reasons as to why most of the countries they use this system, it is because the government from this system, when it is liberalized, it can get revenue from this system. But also you can add all other advantages which we have discussed in the discussion of flexible exchange rate system. That is for the first question, hoping you have understood and how to go through. So use the advantages of flexible exchange or liberalized exchange system. Now we go to the second question, question number two. Question number two, it is asking, Tanzania is experiencing unfavorable balance of trade due to increased import of goods and services from other countries. As economist, what would you advise the government of Tanzania to do in order to lower its import? You see, I read again the question. Tanzania is experiencing unfavorable balance of trade due to increased import of goods and services from other countries. As economist or as economic student, what would you advise the government of Tanzania to do in order to lower its import? So again, this question, it is coming from international trade. It is asking that Tanzania, it is facing or experiencing an unfavorable balance of trade. We go back to what we did in the class, or recall what we did in the class. When we say there is an unfavorable balance of trade, meaning that import exceeds export. It means we import much than what we export. That means there is an unfavorable balance of trade because there is greater import of goods and services from other countries than what we export to abroad. Now for that case, we say there is unfavorable. Now if there is that situation, that means import is so high in the country. Now as economic student, what would you advise the government to do so as to lower the import? Now this question is going to the part of, if you remember the part of trade protectionism. Trade protectionism. Remember, when you adopt a trade protectionism, which we say this is a statement, a policy, where the government adapt to create barriers against too much import. If we find that the import of goods and services, they have caused problems to our industries, to our infant industries, to our domestic activities, our domestic production, then the government can create protectionism policies which they are aiming to reduce or to lower import in favor of export. So it means this question demands you to go back to the part of trade protectionism in those methods or techniques which are used to protect domestic industries and domestic economy. Now for that case, it means as economic student or economist, you have to advise the government to use different techniques, different methods, different ways to control import by imposing those methods of trade protectionism. Now if you remember what you can advise the government, one of the methods they can use, it is to introduce or to increase tariffs. To increase, if tariffs are there, then you have to increase. If they are not there, then you have to initiate tariffs. Tariffs, these are tax on export and import. Those are tariffs. It means for those imported goods, because the aim is to advise the government to reduce import. It means one of the advice we have to give the government is to increase tariffs, and if they have not yet introduced, then to introduce tariffs in the economy. What is the role of tariff? It means when the government imposes tariffs on imported goods, these tariffs can be in different aspects. For example, you can impose tariffs on specific quantities. You can impose tariffs on according to value of the goods or quality, or you can impose on both quality and quantity. Now for that case, the aim of tariff or tax, it means when tax is imposed, it means we expect the price for import, price for import to increase. It means when price for import increases because of tariff imposed, we expect demand for import to go down. So it means due to imposition of tariffs or tax, price for imported goods has increased. Then due to increase in price for imported goods, demand for imported goods goes down. That means the rate of importation will be controlled because demand for import has lowered. Now for that case, we can advise the government to use this method to reduce import or to lower import of goods so as to protect domestic industries and domestic economy. The second advice we can use the so-called quota or quotas. Now quotas here, sometimes I said import can be so high just because we have not set a limit at which a country must export or import. Now by using quota, it means this is quantitative method. That means here you use quantity. That is quantitative method, quantity. It means the government can set a limit or a certain amount of which is needed to be imported into the country and not above that one. For example, maybe Tanzania is exchanging with Uganda. That is an example. But now maybe import of goods from Uganda has increased in Tanzania and we want to control the import of goods from Uganda. Probably Uganda is taking example of all other foreign countries which are importing goods to Tanzania. Now we want to lower import of these goods by using quotas. It means, for example, we exchange, Uganda is importing, let's say, tea into Tanzania. That is an example, importing tea into Tanzania. Now when we use quotas, it means, for example, if Uganda maybe it used to import maybe more than 1 million ton of tea in Tanzania, maybe each year they import or they export to Tanzania more than 1 million tons of tea each year. But the government of Tanzania or the economy of Tanzania is suffering from this importation because it is too heavy. Now by using quota, the government can tell Uganda to import not greater than maybe, let's say, it was from 1 million, now let's say only 300,000 tons of tea. So it means the government has set a maximum amount of tea which should be imported in Tanzania from Uganda. So it means we have controlled the import by setting a limited amount of goods which that country should be importing to the other country. Now for that case, we will be lowering import by quotas. That means we set a limit or a maximum amount of goods which should be imported. Likewise, maybe we are doing business with China. It is importing goods to us or sell it to us. But we want to control or to lower import. Then we set a maximum amount which China should import in Tanzania, not above that amount which is set. If it is tea, it is size, or it is any commodity, then you set a certain amount of which you should not import above that one. That is by using quota. Then the third, what you can advise the government, it is the so-called total ban. Now here, total ban, if maybe a certain inputs, they have been seen that they are problem in the economy, complete problem in the economy. They are causing chaos in the economy. They are causing maybe decline in our industries, those inputs. Then the government can introduce total ban, either by using a law. They can prepare a law which is saying maybe from this day you are not allowed to import. That means not limiting the amount or imposing tax. That means total ban means completely you prohibit importation of that kind of input, that kind of good. Maybe that good, it is causing problem in the economy. So by law, you set law maybe through the parliament, which will be allowing not to import those goods into the country. That means when you say total ban, that means completely a ban of the use of that good. For example, maybe what the government did last time, that's an example with total ban. When the government decided to ban the issue of the use of plastic bags, where that is total ban, that means they are not allowed to be used, not reducing, but they are not allowed to be used. So even if we are importing goods from other countries, but they are causing problem, we can impose total ban, where those goods will not be allowed to be imported or exported into Tanzania. That is a total ban. Number 4, you can use the and the export bureaucratic procedures. Import and export bureaucratic procedures. Here, the government can impose complex and time-consuming procedures. It means for someone to get a license to import goods in Tanzania, it will take him complex procedures. It will consume him a time until that time that person is going to give up making follow up on that license, because it is time consuming, too much bureaucracy. Then most of the importers, they will give up from making follow up on those licenses. So this one, they are aiming to discourage importers from asking for the license to import goods. For that case, you can control by imposing those ones. The other one, we have the so-called voluntary export restraint. Now, this is an agreement. Here, agreement between exporting and importing country. So it means if the importing country is suffering, it can come into agreement with the exporting country that we are tired with your export. Now let you export only this, only reduce this one. So once they reach agreement, that means that is the best way. And this method, it is viewed as the best way of lowering import, because this method, it is a negotiation or agreement between the two sides. That means no one is suffering, because you come into table of discussion, then you reach an agreement that Tanzania and Kenya will now be importing this amount only. So it is a table discussion which is coming into agreement between the two countries and agreeing in terms of how much should be exported and how much should be imported. This is voluntary export restraints. Another one, you can use the so-called product standardization. Product standardization, that is another method or another advice. You can say you can advise the government to use product standardization. It means the government, through different agencies, we have some agents which are dealing with the quality of the products. They can set a standard, very high standard for goods to be imported. It means, for example, we have the TFDA, we have the TBS. These, they are dealing with the quality and the standard of the goods which should be consumed and used in Tanzania. Now, through these agents, the government can set very high standard for a good to be imported in Tanzania. That means any good which will not qualify to that standard will not be imported. So it means you will reduce import by setting standard for those goods. Maybe we want to import TVs from European countries. Then we set a standard of those TV to be imported in Tanzania. We want to import maybe those cosmetics from those developed countries. We set a standard at which those cosmetics should meet. Now, those which do not meet the standard, they will not be allowed to import. Now, for that case, we will be controlling import by making product standardization, by using our own agents like this one, TFDA and the TBS. And the last one, we have the so-called procurement policy. Now, in procurement policy, the government and all sectors which are under the government and all departments, they can be advised not to buy goods from outside. That means those departments, the government departments and other sectors and other individuals, they have to be advised to depend on their own economy. That means to buy goods produced in our economy. Instead of buying maybe furniture from outside, we buy furniture produced in Tanzania. Instead of buying maybe, cotton from outside, we purchase cotton produced in Tanzania. It means so that we feel proud using our own products. For that case, we will control import because we are advised to use those goods produced in Tanzania. That is for that case. Now we go to the question number 3. Question number 3, which I said will be a homework. Question number 3 will be used as homework. The informations below were taken from country M on export and import of the country. The informations below were taken from country M on export and import of the country. Now you can see that table there. We have the first column, we have import price, the second import quantity, the third export price, the fourth export quantity. Then we have net barter, which there are no figure there. We have gross barter, terms of trade. That TOT stands for terms of trade. Terms of trade. So it means, see, from those figures, the question there, number one, it is complete the table above. Remember I said we have price for import, quantity imported, export price, export quantities. Then we have the column for net barter, terms of trade, and gross barter, terms of trade. Now the question is asking, number one, complete the table above. It means you complete the part of net barter, terms of trade, and gross barter, terms of trade. Then number two, briefly explain what balance of trade is country M experiencing. Briefly explain what balance of trade is country M experiencing. It means after calculating those net barter terms of trade and gross barter terms of trade, then briefly explain which balance of trade is country M experiencing. Remember, balance of trade, we have so many there. So try to check which among those three, which this country is experiencing which. That is for this question. So try to settle and work on this question. And this is the end of our discussion. Meet you in another lesson and stay safe.